This video is going to give an overview for how we produce data through experiments. So data can be obtained in two ways: an observational study, which we observe individuals and measure variables, but we don't try to influence anything. They're used usually to describe a group or a situation, and one example of them is sample surveys. The other way that we obtain data is through experiments, where we deliberately impose some treatment on individuals to try to gauge their responses and get data that way. And we study whether the treatment causes a change in the response. So both experiments and observational studies, their goal is to detect a relationship between explanatory and response variables. The experiments create differences in the explanatory variable and then looks at the changes in the response variable. So they're looking for cause and effect conclusions. Observational studies, on the other hand, just observe the differences, notice any related differences, and they're looking for an association between the variables. So why would you not always use an experiment? Why would you not always try to influence what's going on? Well, there are a couple reasons. Sometimes it's unethical or impossible to assign people to receive a specific treatment. Like if you want to know if something causes cancer, and you're pretty sure it does, you don't want to give that to people on purpose to try to cause cancer in them. But you could look at an observational study to see whether or not the people who are exposed to that in some way get cancer from it. The other reason is that certain explanatory variables, they're inherited traits, so you can't just assign them. So you can't, if you want to look at the influence of gender on something, you can't assign people genders. You can't assign people to be left-handed. So you would do an observational study with those. Okay, so one problem that you can find in experiments is something called confounding. So there might be other variables, other lurking variables, which make the groups different from each other, that are in addition to the explanatory variable you're looking at. And it's hard to separate the impact of those variables from the impact of the explanatory variable. So that's something we call confounding. We've confounded our results through this other lurking variable. The solution with confounding, if you're doing an experiment, you randomize the people who receive the treatments or the individuals who receive the treatments. Because whatever that confounding variable is, you should be able to even it out among the groups if you randomly assign them. With observational studies, you can't do that, but what you can do is measure those variables and determine the impact that they're having on the response, and then adjust for those variables when you analyze things.